one thing: happiness. And you know what happiness is? Happiness is the smell of a new car. It's freedom from fear. It's a billboard on the side of the road that screams with reassurance that whatever you're doing, it's okay.
That was a piece from Mad Men. Mad Men is a very popular television show. I believe it's on one of the premium cable channels. And the interesting thing about Mad Men is the way that they depict smoking is the way their advertising depicts smoking to the general public. And when you're looking at that era, the 60s and 70s era, smoking was cool. It gave you that edge. It made you feel a certain way. And ultimately, as we know now, smoking causes cancer. So, the irony of today's show is that we have the grandson of R.J. Reynolds, the creator of the cigarette, which is a billion-dollar organization, on the show. And Patrick has, I believe it was in the mid-'80s, started a nonprofit organization against smoking. So, yes, against the very principles that his grandfather put in place at R.J. Tobacco. So let's welcome Patrick to the show. It will be an interesting show. I hope every show that we do, you leave with something, a bit of something that you didn't know prior to listening to the show. So without further ado, let's bring Patrick in. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Well, glad to be on board, Guy.
Tell me a little bit about your organization.
Well, my only memories of my father, R.J. Reynolds Jr., are of a man dying from smoking. And as a boy, I remember him gasping for breath and counting the time that he had left to live. My parents got divorced when I was 3, and I only got to see him like 5 times after that. And every time he was sicker and sicker and just, really wasting away. So I, later as a man, as I got in touch with the magnitude of the loss in my life, not having a father there for me, began to get in touch with my anger for the tobacco that killed him. And never mind that my family made billions from the tobacco industry. My grandfather founded the company that makes Camels and Winstons, and my father was his eldest son and died from the products that made our family rich and powerful. That's why I chose to turn my back on the tobacco industry. And I discovered when I first spoke out publicly in Congress that I had a tremendous platform, a real platform for sending a message against smoking, for keeping kids from starting, and from empowering smokers who want to quit successfully. And that's what I've been doing for over 20 years. I speak in a lot of middle schools and high schools, and I'll do this work the rest of my life, not just because my dad died from smoking, but as a member of the Reynolds family, I get to make a difference on this issue. And even though nobody's getting rich doing the work fighting tobacco use, I sure do love the work. I run the Foundation for a Smoke-Free America. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and I speak all over the nation and hope to speak internationally if we can raise enough funding and enough support to get me to China, where I could reach 1 billion people for a day. I can get them thinking about quitting smoking. To India, to Russia. I'll do this work the rest of my life. And I do speak at a lot of middle schools and high schools. That's my preferred audience.
Well, how is your,
when I speak,
not to interrupt, but how has your public stand against tobacco affected your relationship with your family?
It hasn't been good, unfortunately. I think some of them were more angry about the book I wrote about the family, The Gilded Leaf, with the great writer Tom Shackman. And that was published by Little Brown. And The Gilded Leaf tells the story of 3 generations of my family. And I wouldn't call it, it's pretty much a tell-all. I mean, so some of my family were as upset with me about the book as they were about, my stance against big tobacco. Nobody's worked in the tobacco company in over 50 years. And my brother's never worked in it. And I have never worked in it. And, I, was briefly trying to get on the board so I could get them to divest the tobacco industry. But that goes back a long time. When I realized that they didn't want to do that, I just said, hey, I'm just going to speak out publicly against the tobacco industry, and that's what I did. They've targeted children in their advertising. They've gone against everything that's just right. They've even used rappers and DJs on the cover of a special edition package of Cools. They know that African Americans smoke more menthol cigarettes, and they have targeted not just African Americans, but African American young women with ads with candy flavorings like mocha and mint and toffee and so on, and not just menthol. And it's just outrageous, what they've done. So we've got rid of a lot of the candy flavorings since we finally passed FDA regulation of tobacco. Interestingly, under the Bush administration, we couldn't get anything through Congress with regard to FDA regulation of tobacco, a federal tobacco tax hike, which keeps kids from starting and brings in revenue and incentivizes current smokers to quit, which will save on healthcare costs. Some taxes are good, tobacco taxes are good, but we couldn't get it done under Bush. What a contrast with Obama and the Democratic Congress. Within 2 weeks of taking office, Obama gave us the 69-cent federal tax hike that was failed under Bush miserably. When it finally passed Congress under Bush, with a few Republican votes, Bush vetoed it twice. But under Obama and the Democrats, the majority at the time, we got it done within 2 weeks of his being in office. And within 6 months, we had FDA regulation of tobacco, which we could not get done under the Bush administration. It was just tabled repeatedly in committee by Republican leaders. But as soon as we got the Democrats in power, within 6 months, we had FDA regulation. And that's how we got rid of the candy-flavored cigarettes that have been so appealing to children.
So I got to ask you this question, not to get too personal. Do you have inheritance from that tobacco fortune, or is that something that have you been ostracized from that fortune? What's your thought process? What's that all look like?
Sure, I'm not a rich man, not in terms of money. My father left a lot of his money to his last wife, but and a lot to charities and foundations. And I think all of us got around $2 million, but I've lost a lot of my inherited money. Hey, I didn't have a father there. And I tell you what, Guy, losing most of my inheritance in a failed stop smoking venture, the Reynolds stop smoking program in the 80s, was probably the best thing that could have happened to me, because I had I wouldn't be the speaker, the advocate that I am if I had a lot of inherited money in the bank, because you tend to get lazy when you got all that money laying around. One thing, I've never really been as lazy, but hey, I partied pretty good in the 80s, and I ran around with the children of billionaires, and I had a pretty wild, crazy life. But hey, now if I want to, I could probably run for Congress and get elected. So, and I'm a much more serious guy. So inherited money when you're young is kind of a poison pill for career. And that's why you see so many suicides and depressed, heirs feeling sorry for themselves.
Agreed.
And one of my brothers. So my family, they didn't like what I did, but I'm not looking back. I like the difference that I get to make. We had some pretty heated discussions with my brothers, and
how are your brothers
some
doing?
of them were. Well, sadly, they're not with us anymore. They've all passed away. One suicide, one a drug addiction. Anyway, it's so horrible that I don't want to get into it right now. I'm not interested. It's just so sad and so tragic, and I get sad thinking about it. So, you know what? Let's talk about the good stuff.
Wow. Well, that's, and I know that a lot of people out there like to think, that having a lot of money is the beat all. I mean, yeah, I agree. I agree with you 100% in regards to being the heir of that type of fortune. It doesn't always lead down the right path. So I agree with you.
Well, the trick that there's two kinds of rich people. George Gilder said it in Wealth and Poverty. On the one hand, you have the declining old rich. That's my family. They give the children inherited money when they're way too young. They are not there as parents. They're off partying, and the children become playboys and alcoholics and drug addicts and suicides very often. And when the children start having a career Thank God Paris Hilton got on a reality show and had a career for herself. And I know her father. Basically, and he's a good guy, Rick Hilton. But the bottom line is that if you don't have a career and don't have something to work for and a goal with too much inherited money at too young an age, it's a poison pill for life. The rich families, by contrast, who tell their kids, you got to go to work. When you get out of college, you're going to have to get a job. I mean, you and I take it for granted, but and I'll tell you, among the very wealthy, the ones who are in the know, who are wise and smart, know you don't give your kids any money. You make them get a job when they get out of college and struggle a little bit. Not struggle a lot, but struggle enough to get the sense of who they are. And one day, like Donald Trump, you can take over an empire and get on a TV show.
I agree with you, and I am a strong advocate to teach your kids to teach your kids how to fish. Don't just give them fish, but teach them how to fish. So that has kind of been something that I've lived by.
It's not a problem that most of our listeners are going to have. If you want to quit smoking out there, and if you're a smoker, get in a program. A lot of people who quit do it without any help, and 95% of them go back to smoking within 12 months. So if you want to get in a program, that's going to make a difference of about 300%. You're going to go, your success rate goes up to 15%. Yeah, 85% still fail, but with the best programs we have. So the failure rate is still dismal. It is just about impossible to quit smoking, but you can do it. And if you've failed before, take comfort in the fact that most smokers do fail several times before they finally stop successfully. So get off your duff, get into a good program called the American Cancer Society, the Lung Association. Go to our website, tobaccofree.org, whatever. But get in a program.
Patrick, tell me a little bit. What savvy tactics, marketing tactics, were used in the '60s to make smoking cigarettes this flamboyant type of product?
Well, tobacco advertising in the '60s was full of beautiful models, youthful models, glowing with good health, playing tennis, climbing mountains, the Marlboro Man, the Winston Man, and even going back as far as the 1920s with women that were 1920s flappers, when few women smoked, and they already began targeting women in the ads and making it fashionable, so that by early 1960s, about half of America was smoking. And we've seen the smoking rates go down as tobacco taxes have been higher and higher, increased by so many states, as we've seen smoking bans. Over half of the U.S. population is now protected by a comprehensive 100% ban. You can't smoke in bars and restaurants. There's a statewide law banning smoking from all bars and restaurants in 29 states. So between the tobacco taxes, the smoking bans, and the money that some of the states spent initially on getting ads on television against smoking, which were very powerful with kids, and the education funding for schools about smoking and tobacco. Those three things taken together have seen our smoking rate go down to 20%, where it hovered for 7 years until about, 3 weeks ago. In June, it was announced by the CDC that after hovering at 20% for 7 years, we saw the smoking rate go down to 18%. So wow. That was pretty great.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's
pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting to know that knowing the effects of long-term smoking, that people still smoke. That in itself is really amazing. In life, I think that the ultimate equation is 2 + 2 is 7. And sometimes we will basically look at life and go on how we feel, not what we know is the right thing to do. Even if it's proven in a lab that smoking will kill you, we still smoke. So I think that what you're doing is you've got guts, and I respect that. So
well, thank you so much. I get asked by some of these guys out there that have those more conservative radio show hosts are saying to me things like, "Mr. Reynolds, come on, we don't need regulation in our lives. We don't need taxes. Come on." And you know what I reply to them? Here it is. We live in a complex time with complex problems. And most of us as citizens don't have the time to look at all the problems of our society in their full complexity. So we are very vulnerable to an oversimplified ideology that says don't tax and taxes are bad and government in your life is just a bad thing. Well, I asked those people, would you like to go back to having smoking in bars? How about smoking on airplanes? Those were regulations that have been passed and continue to be passed, and they're good regulations. What about taxes? Well, gosh, tobacco taxes, they keep kids from starting to smoke. That's proven. They incentivize smokers to quit. Gosh, that'll save on healthcare costs. And guess what? They also bring in revenue. So tobacco, if you'd rather raise the state income tax or the state sales tax, and I don't think you would, but taxing tobacco is acceptable to voters and popular with politicians, and we are going to be looking at higher and higher tobacco taxes. There's a bill now to raise the federal tobacco tax by another $2, and states are passing state tobacco tax hikes right and left. So some taxes are good taxes, and you cannot govern effectively with an oversimplified ideology that says, oh, all taxes are bad, all regulations, all government in your life is a bad thing. When it comes to tobacco, that gives the lie to that oversimplified ideology. That Republican ideology is dangerous. I believe it will lead to the decline of our nation if we start governing with these stupid, narrow, blinders on, sweeping generalizations. It's going to lead to poor government. The Democrats, I think, know that good government requires a little fine-tuning, and I hope we get back with the Democratic majority in Congress and continue to have a Democratic president, and then I think our country will be on a safer, more stable, better path that will be better for all of us.
Have you petitioned Hollywood to maybe back off a little bit on how it glamorizes tobacco?
Well, I certainly have championed the group that does that, and that is a huge influence on kids. There was a big rise in smoking in movies. Kids look up to movie stars as role models, and when they glamorize smoking and making it look cool, then that sends them such a terrible message. And I always, when I speak at the middle schools and high schools, do a section on smoking in movies to open their eyes, to empower them, to understand that these stars are not really doing them any favors. And I let them know. I say there are very few real heroes in the world, and there are some. They exist, but I get paid to be here speaking to you. Not to you, but in schools, and I make my living that way. And I'm not a hero. I'm doing my job. And when you hero worship somebody, you're giving all the credit away. Wow, you're so cool, and you're belittling yourself. The initiation goes on to say that at the end of my talk for the kids, that thousands of years ago, the elders would take the kids out into the forest or the desert, and they would initiate them into life, often by giving them a ritual wound or making them uncomfortable, depriving them of sleep, depriving them of food. And it was done all over the world, and I never could understand why elders would want to do that to the teens. And one day, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I got it. And what I realized was the elders, I think, were saying to the young ones, until today, you've been a child. We adults have done our level best to keep your eyes shielded from the evil people in this world and from the pain in this world. But today, as I initiate you into this life and to welcome you now a little closer to the world of adults, I want to let you know that there are bad people out there. There's tobacco executives that don't care about you. They only care about increasing market share for their brands and making sure that, they know that after 19, nobody starts smoking. 9 out of 10 smokers get addicted by age 18 or 19. So they don't care about you. Movie stars who glamorize it, they don't care about you. They're looking to get their next picture and be a bad boy outlaw. So they don't care about you. And life will throw you some pain. One day a grandparent may die. Hopefully, God, when you're in your 60s, please, God, not before then, or losing a parent. And it hurts us adults. And life will throw you difficult moments and challenges. And a lot of uninitiated adults out there, I tell them, go to a bar and drink because they don't want to feel their pain. They keep smoking because they don't want to feel the pain of nicotine withdrawal. They don't want to feel the pain of going through the divorce, so they take drugs and destroy their lives, and they escape into these substances, or even things that aren't harmful, like overeating or turning on the music or turning on the computer and going to work, because we don't want to feel our feelings. It's too painful. And the message of the initiation is stay with your feelings, stay with what's bothering you, and talk to someone about it. Talk to a friend, a trusted teacher, a school counselor, and be able to talk about what you're feeling, know what you're feeling, and together we will solve the problem and start the healing process. And I tell those kids, if you're carrying around some deep, dark secret you never told anybody, talk to a trusted teacher, the school counselor, your friends, your parents, and together we'll get through whatever life throws at us. Welcome now a little closer to the world of adults. And with that, I initiate you into life. And I like to close the talk with.
Well, before you close the talk, because you're far more interesting than I thought. Don't take that the wrong way. But you've got, I thought, my initial thought was, you might have a strong taste of being maybe a trust fund baby, but ultimately when anybody loses a parent, regardless of how much money is in the bank or isn't in the bank, it's always going to chase you in life. It's always going to be that there's always going to be that missing void in your life because of that parent not being around. What was what was it like growing up with the last name of Reynolds?
Well, I think there were a lot of, I had a lot of expectations and high hopes. I always thought, one day I'll be super rich, and that didn't happen. But I'm certainly worth well under $1 million today. Not going to make a secret of that, otherwise I'll never get any endowment from a foundation. But, growing up, yes, I had high hopes. And in the 80s, yes, I did have more inherited money, and I did run around with the children of billionaires, and, had quite an interesting experience, and realized in the end that was not a life that I wanted, nor could I afford it in the end. But it was just wildly interesting to have rubbed elbows with a lot of those people, and certainly I have access to the billionaires of the world. But I am, those things have to be used carefully, and my expectations were high. And sure, I had a level of luxury, and I, partied on people's yachts and private DC-9s and so on, and had quite a good time in the 1980s. And that was really the core of the 80s. And realized by the 90s that I just, had turned against the tobacco industry and turned away from wealth and went on a different path. Sometimes in life you come to a fork in the road and one arrow says, take this way. It's easy. It's a nice downhill walk. No danger. The other arrow says, danger ahead, unknown territory. Take the frightening arrow. And that's what my psychologist told me back in the 80s. And she was great. The woman was a genius and she was a real mentor and gave me a lot of my, empowered me. And I always tell people at colleges when I speak there, if you haven't been in therapy, I don't regard you as fully educated. Get in therapy and talk to a psychologist about your, how the way your parents treated you when you were little, your longings as a man, your feelings as a woman. Those are the things that by exploring that with a psychologist, you get clarity in life. And that was so empowering to me. So I think it's just part of a good education. And don't wait till you have a life crisis like a divorce or depression to get into therapy. Do it before you do, because it's very, very empowering. And so much came to me from my therapist. And I was an actor back in the day. I starred in a movie called Eliminators. If you go to YouTube and put Eliminators, there's me as Android the Robot, and in 1986. And I had done, some other parts in TV and films. I think I'm Patrick Reynolds 1 on IMDb, but not acting anymore. I'm hoping that one of the networks is going to pick up my book as a miniseries for television, The Gilded Leaf. But it's a great, great read, and I had a meeting with the head of one of the networks who does miniseries development recently, and you know, they try and get them. They're very interested, but try and get them to read the book. And so far, it's been since February. I haven't heard back, and this is July. So you don't hold your breath in Hollywood for projects to get made. But you know, my background as an actor, I think, empowered me as an advocate and as a speaker. And you know, I got a lot of things I want to do in my life, and but you know, which I'm not ready to announce publicly. But we'll see. We'll see where life goes.
Now, are you married?
I am married with a 3.5-year-old son, and I love that boy. He's just beautiful.
You stud muffin, you. Huh?
I love that little guy, and I'll be there for him the rest of his life. And never mind. Never mind.
Well, that's awesome.
A family member stepped forward, and they're going to take care of his tuition for private school. So. Yay, I'm happy. He'll always go to private school, and that's something that I'm very happy to have that security.
You know, I'll close on my end, and you can close on your end. What advice would you give to, you know, you've seen this, and I've seen this throughout the last 20 years in Hollywood, and that is you have this, the last 20 or so years in Hollywood, where you have that actor that is hot, or actress that's hot, and then nothing. And then there's that psychological bender they go on where they turn to smoking or drinking excessively because ultimately they may never make it back on top. What would you say to something like that? What would your advice be for somebody that falls in that particular category?
Oh, that's easy. Basically, most of the people that hit it big will start the self-destructive behavior at the height of their career. The smoking, the drinking, the drug use is right at the height of their career. Why do they do that? Well, my wonderful old shrink, Irene Kasorla, with a K, Kassorla, she wrote some great books. Irene said that people self-destruct because they can't handle being successful. And when you're 2 or 3 years old, and again, that's why it's so important to get in therapy. It's just a healthy, preventative thing to do. When you get clarity, she said, when you're a baby, your mother, you know, holds you in her arms and loves you and loves on you, and then you pee on the bed, and she goes, "Patrick, you pissed in the bed. Bad. Oh, please, I can't handle it." And then you're back in her arms. "Oh, my darling Patrick, my child." So it's like the child feels like a total loser and a failure when mommy gets mad and cries. But it's home, and we associate it with the comfort of mother's love. So when we get older, a lot of people do go through a great fall, especially powerful men and women go through a fall. It's called a catabasis, and that is something that a lot of people do. They self-destruct because they can't handle being successful, and it's too much unfamiliar territory. It's too weird. They want to go home to feeling like a failure, like when they were 2 years old. So the message here is, and the lesson, the moral of the story is, hold on to your success. Keep your chin up. Do not self-destruct. And if people are adoring you and worshiping you, just deal with it and keep your chin up. It may be uncomfortable. It may drive you crazy. You might hate it. But try and understand that it's just... it's a blessing, and tolerate it, and do not self-destruct under any circumstances.
Okay, well put. Well put. Now go ahead and we can wrap. Let's wrap this up. Is there anything you would like to say in closing?
Sure. I got a platform to say things that I want to say, and what I'll say in closing is the way I closed my talks for the kids. You know, it was a great privilege growing up as a Reynolds, of course. And I've tried to use that as to be a positive role model. What I like to say to the kids is another private theory of mine that came from yours truly, came across some data that said a lot of kids today don't believe in the future. So I say at the end of my talks to them, we live in a time of new diseases, SARS, bird flu, AIDS, swine flu. It's scary. There's wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. There are the crash of the stock market market in 2008? Will there be a job out there for me? Am I ever going to be able to own my own business? I mean, hasn't CVS Drugs and Walmart and Costco put all the mom and pops out of business? You know what? My message here is you can do this thing. And, then what about a terrorist attack at home? I believe that kids today are concerned about the future. And if a child feels there's no future for them, they're much more likely to start using drugs because what the heck? May as well take drugs or smoke because, I don't have a future anyway. And my message for those kids is that, first of all, if you have those worries or fears, talk to a trusted teacher, the school counselor, talk to somebody. Second, try to think positive. I can't do it. I can do it. Third, reevaluate. What is wealth? Is wealth just about money? Isn't it about going outside on a beautiful day and connecting with nature and saying yes to life? Isn't wealth about more than just money? Oh, you're rich, but I'm not really rich in terms of money, but you know what? I have real wealth. And lastly, I invite the kids to catch my faith. I've got this rock solid faith. Call me crazy, call me stupid, but I just believe that there is something wondrous coming in this world. And, you will need your health, every precious bit of your health, and hold on to it for those incredible years ahead of us all. Every great speech closes with a promise, and I leave them with the promise of the coming tobacco-free society. It's coming. And ladies and gentlemen, it's coming because of you out there, because you are not smoking or because you're quitting. I believe in you, and you are the future. You're the reason that we will have a society free of tobacco, free of drugs one day. So that's it. And
all right, my friend. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to stop by the Guy Boudreaux show. Well, I think today's interview was very interesting, and that is, there's, for every action, there's a reaction, and that is, where do you go when you get the call, phone rings, it's your doctor on the phone, and he says, I've got good news and I've got bad news. The bad news is you've got cancer. The good news is we can save part of your lungs. Now, at that point in time, you can't go back. You start to rewind your life. You can't go back. You can only move forward. So what is it about human nature that allows us to be okay with playing Russian roulette with the cancer stick? Or anything. Look, alcohol is bad too. If you use it the wrong way, if you drink too much of it, I get it. But ultimately, what is it that still allows us, I know I sound like a broken record here, but what is it that allows us to continue to do something that we know will possibly one day give us cancer? So there's always interesting information on our Facebook page about future shows, information about shows we've done in the past. So please, just reach out to us via Twitter at GTB Radio or on our Facebook page at GTB Radio. Have a blessed week. Make the best out of it. Keep your head low. Keep it moving. I'm Guy Boudreaux.
You one time laughed before.